This morning, the Hamilton County Grand Jury indicted Damion McRae on a 7-count indictment for the March 12th incident involving Officer Grubbs and Officer Kuiper. Do you all have the indictment? Okay. Under the indictment, he's been indicted with 1 count of attempted murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of weapons under disability, 1 count of carrying concealed weapon, 1 count of assault. The attempted murder and felonious assaults are also gun specified, which requires mandatory time. He faces over 20 years in prison if convicted. There's a very large likelihood that we are going to go back to the grand jury. We have a little follow-up to do and seek an indictment for attempted murder against Officer Kuiper also. This defendant, Officer Grubbs, fired 17 shots, and he was shot once in the lower abdomen. Officer Kuiper fired a total of 8 rounds. Damion McRae fired 1 round successfully. He was carrying a Cal-Tech 9mm carbine rifle. It had a 30-round clip. It contained 10 bullets at the time of this incident. He also had on his person a .22 caliber with 6 rounds of ammunition in it, and he was carrying a Viper Tech stun gun. McRae has a criminal record consisting of 26 misdemeanors and 14 felony arrests. Charges include multiple arrests for drug possession, drug trafficking, possession of drug paraphernalia, assault, resisting arrest, weapons under disability, aggravated menacing, obstruction of official business, carrying concealed weapons, and domestic violence. There's a lot of people that should share blame in this, that he's even out on the street. And it starts, frankly, with some state laws that were passed that on these low-level felonies, the judge is urged not to send them to the penitentiary. I have the transcript. I received the transcript of the sentencing on this case. Apparently, there were conversations between an assistant prosecutor, the judge, and defense attorneys, and to the best of my knowledge, the judge told them what he was going to do based on the pre-sentence investigation. And the assistant prosecutor, on the record, left it at the judge's hands for sentencing. And this judge chose not to send him. That's what happened. Anyway, we're going to be releasing, I'm going to play an edited version of both body cameras so you can see it. But the city's file sharing page, you can go and download the entire thing. We've tried to strike a balance with these body camera cases. The Supreme Court has ruled a couple of times already on them. And basically they have stated that if it's evidentiary in nature, it's not a public record. And I understand that. I understand the need for the community to see what's happened in these cases. It's our position that as long as our investigation is completed in terms of the grand jury, that we don't have any problem releasing it. Anyway, Chief, you want to say something?
First of all, I'd like to thank the prosecutor for bringing these charges. Very clearly, as you're going to see, this individual certainly had a desire to kill a police officer, if not both officers. There are some things that occurred that I agree that really requires some changes in our system, that an individual that can commit such acts should possibly be incarcerated before such actions take place. As you get to see the videos, I'll answer more questions that you may have.
Yeah, I got to speak with the chief before we came down, and you know, the problem, if you want to cut to the chase on this, the problem is money. And when you close state penitentiaries, I've tried twice to pass a local tax to build a new jail here, and the voters just don't have the stomach for it. So we have to deal with what we're dealing with, and they've changed state law. If you don't have a prior record to commit a felony for, the law is very clear. You are not going to the penitentiary. Anyway, we're going to play this right now. I think the first one's Officer Grubbs' body camera. Keep in mind that the sound picks up like 30 seconds into it. But I think you're going to be shocked when you see how close this individual is to the police officers when he opens fire. Peggy, go ahead and start. Officer's already shot by now.
See your hands! I'm struck. Right in the crotch. Oh, get out! Don't get out! Get out! Shoot your hands now! Your hands! See, lay down now! Keep your hands up! Let me see your hand! Get your hand out of your pocket! Get your hand out of your pocket!
That's where the revolver was.
Keep your hands up! 21, we're outside. One at gunpoint. He has a gun right with him. He is up and alert. I am also struck. I'm struck right in the crotch. All right.
Expedite fire, please.
I don't know where it's at either. It's in your.
I think you got hit in the butt.
That is right.
I'm not. Just lay right there and relax, okay? They have him in custody. I just need fire from my partner. He is struck in the groin. No, he's struck in the groin. And I don't want to move him.
The next one's Officer Kuiper's body camera. And you can see a lot better in this one. can see McRae walking down towards the officer right now. He's got the gun tucked back behind his leg.
Stay down. Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Keep your hands where I can see them. You all right, Ken?
Here's some stills from this video. You can see the gun tucked behind his leg there. That's how close they were when he fired.
How much of a distance would you estimate that is, Mr. Deere?
These are 6 feet.
I would say 5 or 6 feet.
Is that it, Peg? Okay. Take a few questions.
Can I ask the chief something real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
Just what obviously what struck me are a couple of things. One is Grubbs is down and wounded and still focused on the composure, the training. It's probably not unusual to you, but I think to the people of Cincinnati it's going to be kind of startling. What do you say?
Ken Grubbs is an 18-year veteran officer, extremely well trained, and I think he demonstrated his training in this actual encounter. The fact that he was able to continue, even after being shot, to continue to defend himself and his partner, and also communicate to the individual that fired the shots, as well as put out transmissions via the radio, I think it demonstrates a tremendous job and, you know, a very well-trained police officer.
Real quickly, did Kuiper, did he put himself in between Grubbs and the shooter, or did I imagine that?
After the initial shots were fired, he did respond to his partner, cover Officer Grubbs while he was down, and continue to ask for additional officers and for fire to come for the injured persons.
Chief, last week the mayor said he felt this was an assassination attempt. You at the time were more measured, so you didn't know what the motivation was by McRae. Now that you've had a week to review everything, what are your thoughts?
The same. You know, I still think that this is an individual who was willing to shoot anyone he encountered. In this particular case, it was police officers that he encountered first.
So who knows what could have happened if he kept walking out
Absolutely.
into the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
I mentioned to the chief this morning that it was, after reviewing the evidence, I mean, it really was an act of God that saved these 2 cops. If that gun hadn't jammed, we could be, unfortunately, going to a couple of funerals.
Joe, do you know how much time McRae had spent in prison or in jail in aggregate?
In aggregate, he spent 2 years and 6 months in prison.
Over a course of how many years? He's 37.
Since he was 18.
Okay, well, fair point. You said the system deserves blame. Does the prosecutor's office deserve any of it?
Well, I mean, we don't sentence people, you know, and you can scream till you're blue in the face. If the judge tells you in chambers what he's going to do, they got a pre-sentence investigation there. They met in chambers. I told him what he was going to do, and they went out on the record and did it.
But just to be, I mean, I have that same transcript.
Yeah.
Just to be honest, the prosecutor didn't go and screw.
Did not.
It was.
No, but I got to tell you, it is not uncommon for prosecutors to say, Judge, we'll leave it to the court.
So place the blame. Place the blame. What do you want the people of Hamilton County to think about in the future, considering what this could have been?
The blame goes to Damion McRae. That's where the blame goes. You know, how do you fix that? How do you fix somebody who's willing to take a gun and just walk up to an officer and shoot him?
You put him away when he's selling fentanyl on the streets.
Right.
So who's to blame for him being out there able to do that? I know you said jails and I'm just saying.
If I was the judge, he would be in prison.
So the blame goes back to the judge then.
It does, but you know, this is like a judicial nightmare when something like this occurs, because they put people on probation and community control all the time, and you know, then when this happens, but I got to be honest. If I had a defendant with this kind of record and he came up in my courtroom, he'd be going to prison.
Mr. Dieter's prosecutor's office also tracks defendants and their criminal history.
Right.
So what do you think the prosecutor's office should be doing to bring more attention to people who have multiple felony convictions, including convictions of drug trafficking and weapons convictions?
Unfortunately,
Higher priority
well,
at the time of sentencing.
well, the judge, everyone's sitting there looking at his record. I mean, this isn't a mystery when they're sentencing somebody like this. They're looking at his record. They know exactly the time he spent. It took, go to court sometime and look at the records we're dealing with, because they're not getting sent. And it's staggering. As I said before, the whole purpose of, and I know Deb Dixon and I have talked about this, they always give our office grief because we fight to keep people in prison that shouldn't be out. And they always say, we're the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. You know, we had to fight for 10 years to keep the Cincinnati Strangler in prison. And somebody with a bunch of low-level felonies, they just don't want them in prison. That's a fact.
Can you describe specifically, would you say resistance or whatever words that you've used from time to time to describe a pushback from the Department of Corrections?
Oh, I mean,
exactly what do they say?
I can
How
tell
do
you.
they say
I mean, we respond to the parole board in every case when they're trying to let somebody out. And we do it so often that it's become a joke to the parole board. It's a joke to them. Well, there's another letter from Dieter's office, you know. I mean, some of the reporters in this room have been to these hearings, and they've seen firsthand how they deal with our request to keep people locked up. And it's difficult. We just had to fight 2 weeks ago to keep a cop killer locked up.
Well, what, if anything, are they saying before the defendants are going to prison? What type of message, what type of
The
request
parole
are you
board?
getting from, no, not from the parole board, from the Department of Corrections itself? Is anybody saying, hey, don't send these guys here? I mean, I know what the law says. There's certain crimes that are having presumption.
Right.
And they're for prison. And there
Right.
are others that have a mandate for community control, depending on
Right.
what's met.
Right.
But nobody is saying, don't send them here if you could send them here.
The push to clean out our state prisons is a very strong one, and it's done legislatively. It can be done by a governor closing a prison, and I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to a parole hearing, but they used to have a sign, Miss Dixon, if you remember, bragging about how many people they let out. Literally bragging with a number, that they had a rolling number. And that's what's driving this thing. And it's money more than anything else.
How many people, and this is going to be a wild estimate on your part, I'm sure, but How many people in Hamilton County have records as extensive as McRae?
A lot.
So how do you single him out?
You really, I mean, you what happens in a sentencing hearing is the probation department prepares a pre-sentence investigation report. Generally, it's confidential, but it lists all the stuff I just talked about, like for him. And the judge, with a few exceptions, has wide latitude to do whatever he thinks he wants to do, right? That's what they do. And, you can... He had never been accused ever of shooting at law enforcement before or anything like that. But he had a crap load of low-level felonies.
Joe, what do you say to the rank and file? You've listened to Sergeant Hills, president of the FOP, really kind of cite this as an example. You're often referred to as the top cop in Hamilton County. What do you say to the men and women in blue who are out there fighting every day to protect the streets? And this has frustrated them, I know, but I hear what you're saying too. There's a tension there. What do you say to the officers who are on the streets?
Well, I can tell you this: that guy's going to jail for the rest of his life. But it's a tough thing to handle when the push from Columbus, the push locally, because we're so overcrowded in the prison system statewide and locally. I mean, you get arrested on a low-level case now and you go to the jail, you're out on the street before the police officer's done with his paperwork. That's how bad it is.
Joe, did one of Grubbs' bullets render that Tech 9 dysfunctional? Is that how that happened?
Quite possibly. There was damage, possibly from a bullet he shot to the gun that caused the gun to misfire.
Well, I'm just in my mind. I'm just thinking what could have happened with the 10 bullets from the Tech 9,
and the 6 in his revolver.
That hadn't been rendered.
And by the way, when they were yelling at him to, show your hands, he was going into his pocket where the gun was.
Chief, I believe these two officers have been partners for a while.
Yes.
How helpful or important was that in dealing with a situation like this, as opposed to maybe two people that were not veterans and maybe had hardly ever worked together, or is it just all works out the same way?
I think that plays a lot. These two officers were very familiar with each other, and their interaction, they were able to respond to each other, and Kiefer was able to come to his assistance very quickly.
But weren't they together?
They were two-man
But
cars.
I'm saying for back in 2014 in Walnut Hills with the guy who killed his mother.
They were.
Weren't those two?
They were.
Brothers then working at
Correct.
that scene? So they've had some pretty.
Yeah, they've been partners for a number of years.
How is Officer Grubbs doing now? Timetable for him getting back? And how
I spoke with him this morning. He's doing well, recovering. He's in good spirits. Very eager to see this prosecuted. And we can sit here and talk about all the causes, but what we're concerned about is what happens with Mr. McRae. That's what I'm concerned with.
And I said, were the guns involved here? Can you talk a little bit more about those guns? Were they weapons that are on the street? Are they designed in used in the drug trade, or what do you know? I've never seen a gun like that, Caltech 9. In other words,
You can buy that the same way you can buy any other firearm, and as far as that, guns are produced legally. It's how they change hands, how individuals come in contact with them that makes them illegal. I know in this particular case, with his record, he certainly was not allowed to be in possession of a firearm.
The woman who called 911, I believe the girlfriend.
Right.
Is there any suggestion that she was involved in this kind of setup, or she just
No.
Not at all.
Beat up?
Not at all.
Is there a timetable for Officer Grubbs to get back on the force?
I don't know exactly right now. He's still recuperating. I'm not exactly sure. He does anticipate returning to duty, as soon as possible.
Sergeant Hills had said that his partner felt blame on himself for not being able to protect his partner.
I think that's a normal thing. When you're there, you want to protect your partner. You want to protect those that you're close to. And in that case, I think that's a normal response.
McRae still hospitalized?
No, he is not. He is in the Hamilton County Justice Center.
And I will say, this video shows a little bit of a different view that I had in my mind, that both officers were together approaching McRae. Clearly, Officer Kuiper was scoping out this other side of the building coming in. So
What he articulated was that he thought he had heard someone exiting a side door, so he approached the side of the building. When he saw no one, then he decided to approach, down the center of the courtyard.
Did they fall like close to each other when they were both hit?
No, they were a good distance apart. In the same courtyard, but one approaching from the center. Officer Kuiper was off to Officer Grubbs' right.
And I'm assuming when the last of Officer Kuiper's body cam, when it looks to be face down on the ground, he's probably on the ground.
He actually falls to the ground,
okay.
And that's where you see the camera on the ground.
McRae was shot 4 or 5 times, I think twice in the head.
So Joe, last question to you really quickly. What message do you have for the people of Hamilton County? Be more engaged in the process, understand state laws, understand how judges are elected, or what are your thoughts? What would you say to the people?
Well, I mean, obviously elections have repercussions, and I wish people paid more attention to that. I
Joe,
do.
you might be in here, but the shots that hit the suspect, were they all fired by Officer Grubbs, or were they fired by a combination?
I don't know.
We don't know that yet. We're still waiting on the ballistics to. Once the investigation is completed, we'll be able to determine which shots hit or struck where.
And he was shot twice in the head
That's what we believe. Yes,
and survived.
because it's very difficult to determine entry and exit wounds, particularly when an individual is alive. It's not like you're doing an autopsy to determine that.
Grubbs have a vest?
Yes, he was struck below his vest.
What, if any, sentencing changes do you think could address some of the problems that go with having some of these career criminals getting community control as opposed to shorter prison sentences? Is there something to be said for if you're convicted of trafficking in fentanyl or fentanyl, then at least you're not eligible for community control? Or
I would have no problem with that at all.
Well, I'm not trying
But
to
the problem
say
is,
that
no,
law.
but the problem is that there's no space for them. That's the problem, We want people like that locked up for sure. Okay? Someone selling drugs, you go over to the courthouse today, I bet there's 25 defendants doing that today, getting sentenced for trafficking. Okay, everyone, thank you.